Hey there, Brutal Knights. I wanted to give a sample of what I'll be doing this month on Patreon, where I'll be reading about sword and buckler techniques. Become a patron if you want to see more unused footage and extra video content like this. Link in the description below. Hey, it's Brutalizer. We're gonna read a few pages from the I.33 Sword and Buckler Fencing book. This is the beginning of the book and it goes through a few situations you'll have to account for in combat when using the first ward. Back in the medieval ages, people spoke differently. Because of this, many of the words in the book are written weirdly, and you'll have to read the definitions of the words being spoken a lot if you don't already know them to understand it. There are multiple interpretations of the book because of this reason. What is important is not the words themselves, but the actions that you perform, and the actions that are performed and described in the images, so that when you're in the heat of battle, you do these actions naturally. Let's begin. Folio 2R. What is being spoken here is that when you are in the first ward, you have two main counters against you. The first one is Hauptschild, where you point your sword and buckler forward, making sure that your buckler is protecting your sword hand, and pointing the sword upward to the sky, or close to it. The reason why Hauptschild is a counter to the first ward is because you are unlikely to be struck in the head when you are in Hauptschild. And the other counter is Langard, and it's basically the same thing, but you extend your sword towards your enemy, so directly forward, showing off its length and making it easy to do a quick thrust. If he uses Hauptschild, it is said to fall below the sword and shield, because at this time period, if he was a common fencer, he would strike to the head. So by performing Schildschlag, a German word for shield blow, it just means block using the buckler. This was a word that I was getting confused over. When I first saw it, I thought it meant thrusting. It doesn't. A thrust is called a sitch in this book. And if your opponent binds and enters, counter with Sichtschlag. So block it, just parry, bro. In this time period, people were more likely to strike you in the head, especially if you were below them. So with your buckler, block an overhead. This last sentence on number 9 says, "But if you would be instructed by the priest council, do bind and enter." I think many people are confused by that sentence. One interpretation means that if your teacher, the priest, tells you to bind and enter to teach you new techniques, or because you're just not good at blocking, then do so. Another interpretation means that the priest counseling is a weird way of saying the way he is fighting, or his fighting style, and the way he moves may not lead to a strike to the head, and he might go for the legs or something instead. Counseling is used on other pages, so I think it just means the student should listen to the teacher if the teacher says to do something different. As once you bind and enter, you could do a multitude of other things. So if you're not fighting the common fencer, then the better option would be to bind and enter, or parry, bro. Parry and wrestle with that sword, to speak in simpler terms. And for line 10, what is being said is the first ward can be parried or displaced by using the same ward. So imagine both opponents in the first ward with their sword under their arms. So a way you can counter this is by putting your sword hand under your buckler, so that when you both strike, your hand is protected so that you can catch the opponent's blade without losing a finger. The thing about these books is that it's all very simple stuff, but because of how weirdly worded it is, it throws off the average reader, leaving them scratching their head in confusion. And Folio 2V, a continuation. Let's go over real quick that grasping and grappling can mean more than just grabbing something with your hand in this book. It can also be associated with catching your opponent's blade and trapping it with both sword and buckler. By catching and using your strength to hold the weapon in place or push it aside or anything like that. That can all be put under grasping. Enclosing the weapon, blocking, all that stuff. It's more than just grabbing your opponent. So the first image, some of it's a little torn up unfortunately. 700 years will do that to you. But it's saying that the pupil is clashing swords with his opponent and entering or stepping forward. So he can place a Schildschlag, or I interpret it as a shield bash against his sword. So he can open his opponent's guard up. But while he enters or approaches, he needs to be very careful about what the priest does. as he is closing in, and he could suddenly take an attack to the head. So he's taking a risk to try and open up his opponent for an attack. Once he is in, he has two options. He can use his buckler to knock his sword away, or he could grip the arms of the priest. His opponent is the priest. And the priest has three options. The first one is Durchtritt, which is just a German word for dodging or sidestepping. Mutation of the sword, which I just think is a weird way of saying parrying, or you can imagine it like wrestling with the sword, moving it aside, that sort of thing. Or with the right hand, he may grasp the sword and shield, which once again could mean more than just grappling onto it, as he only has one hand, and it is saying that he'll grasp both the sword and the shield, so it might mean to catch both of them in between each other with his right hand, or the buckler, or it can mean in the literal sense where you grab your opponent's sword with your right hand while holding on to the buckler. However, if there are any techniques like that, a certain way to hold a buckler when grasping, I haven't seen any. But that's likely to be it out of all of them, in my personal opinion. But exactly how you should do that without the buckler getting in the way of your grapple is unclear. When this book was written, it was most likely just common knowledge of how you should grapple, and that knowledge isn't so clear anymore. Either way, the details of what's being said does not really matter. The point is that these are the options that are most commonly used, because they work. So that's the 2 pages of Folio 2. There is more to come as the month passes by. Thank you for supporting Brutalizer.